Hello my friends, this is Dr. Beter. Today is August 26, 1977, and this is my audio letter number 25. It is now almost 3 months since I recorded audio letter number 24 on May 28, 1977, and as I warned you then, the plans for dictatorship and war are now being speeded up. At that time, about 3 months ago, the Soviet program of planting nuclear weapons in the inland lakes and rivers of the United States had turned into an all-out, silent attack on our country. Soviet agents in vans, campers, and trucks were fanning out unhampered throughout our land, turning our peaceful countryside into an unsuspected battlefield strewn with nuclear mines capable of destroying our water resources. And at no level of government, local, state, or federal, was anything being done to stop it. Local and state authorities, when alerted to Soviet activities in their areas of jurisdiction, were shrugging it off in absolute disbelief. They were saying in effect, "Relax, just trust the federal government to take care of everything." With this attitude as an excuse, they were and still are shirking their sworn duty to at least investigate conclusively some very specific leads they have been given. But as for the federal government, actions such as the waiving of the Jones Act by Treasury Secretary Blumenthal to allow Soviet vessels to ply our inland waterways speak for themselves. And just as in the case of the Fort Knox gold scandal 3 years ago, there's no effort whatever now to disprove my charges about the Soviet nuclear sabotage of America, but only to discredit them. I think this parallel makes the current status of the gold scandal worthy of comment. After 3 years of tireless effort by my friend Edward Durrell, the Fort Knox gold scandal now shows renewed signs of breaking into the open, in spite of all the lies and tricks the Rockefeller-controlled federal government can do. The international financial community is now more concerned about the massive evidence of fraud surrounding America's alleged monetary gold supply than ever before, because the sheer weight of evidence now makes it impossible for anyone except the Rockefeller-dominated major media to ignore it. The Carter administration has become so concerned about this that on July 28, 1977, just last month, Treasury Secretary Blumenthal took the extreme step of going to the Fort Knox Bullion Depository himself. Can you imagine? He had himself photographed by Time magazine, sitting on the same stack of warmed-over junk gold bars viewed at Fort Knox in compartment number 33 in September 1974. Then he went to Louisville to deliver a speech prepared before he left Washington, saying how impressed he was with the wonderful hoard of gold he had just inspected at Fort Knox. Former Treasury Secretary William Simon knew better than to go there personally, even at the height of the public controversy over Fort Knox 3 years ago. Instead, he sent poor Mrs. Mary Brooks, the unsuspecting head of the Bureau of the Mint, to tell the world, "It's all here." But now extreme measures are called for in the name of cover-up, because while the public sleeps, the powerful financial community shows signs of awakening with a roar. If you would like a very hard-hitting, fully documented summary of the mountain of evidence that now has the Treasury Department so worried, send a business-sized self-addressed envelope bearing first-class United States postage for 2 ounces, 24 cents at the time of this recording, to Mr. Edward Durrell, D-U-R-E-L-L, Post Office Box 586, Berryville, Virginia, zip 22611. Only time will tell whether in fact the Fort Knox gold scandal will at last be revealed truthfully to the American people at large. But even if it breaks today, it's already more than 3 years overdue. The United States Congress chose to ignore my charges and my evidence when I testified about it in April 1974. And my friends, we don't have 3 years to wait for the truth to come out about the Soviet nuclear mining of the United States. We are on borrowed time. That is why, after recording audio letter number 24 3 months ago, I suspended the audio letter to concentrate all my efforts on a campaign to prove conclusively the presence of Soviet nuclear weapons inside our country for all to see. I knew that it was a long shot because none of the citizen groups with whom I was in contact had access to sophisticated equipment of any kind, or much money to spend on it, or even much free time. But I believed it was still worth a try, because as I warned in audio letter number 24, only total exposure of the Soviet threat to our nation has any chance of turning aside Nuclear War I. It is therefore painful to have to tell you, my friends, that my efforts and those with whom I have been working around the United States have so far been unsuccessful in achieving their primary goal, the physical recovery and public display in a safe manner of a Soviet nuclear bomb from a lake or river. There has been some partial success in spreading the alarm more widely than before, but the total exposure which is so vital to our survival as a nation still has not been accomplished. Since recording audio letter number 24 in May, I have responded to requests from concerned citizens throughout America asking for the locations of any Soviet nuclear weapons in their areas. In many cases, upon receiving this information, people have tried to get local or state authorities to investigate, usually without even a token of success, although in 2 or 3 cases there does seem to be some genuine interest at the local level. Other people have gone to their local newspapers, but these in general have not bothered even to contact me to find out more about the story. Finally, scattered attempts have been made by groups of citizens in a number of states to send scuba divers down to search the bottom of reservoirs in an attempt to actually find a bomb. These private citizens, who by their own choice have donned diving equipment and spent their own time and their own money to at least try, deserve all of our thanks. I am not aware of a single case in which these private searches were able to be done with the aid of anything more than a hand-carried underwater light, or in rare cases a commercial underwater metal detector, and some divers do not even have this much. And yet they have tried to do that which the Federal Government, spending over $80 billion yearly on so-called defense, refuses to do. In one case which has been confirmed, 2 bombs were found and retrieved, not from a reservoir or river, but from a saltwater cove in a resort area on the East Coast. But these 2 bombs, instead of being made public, were turned over to the Federal Government by the individuals involved for their own reasons. Otherwise, I cannot confirm that any other bombs have been found or retrieved up to now. 2 months ago, what may turn out to have been our one best opportunity to catch some Soviet agents red-handed occurred in Texas. An individual was driving along a country road after midnight when he noticed an old-style green and white delivery van with Florida license plates parked for the night on the roadside. It looked like a hippie van, yet was parked with legal precision, complete with regulation high-visibility warning markers set out along the edge of the road. Something just didn't look right about it, and on a hunch my friend found a payphone and called to ask whether by chance any Soviet vans were scheduled to be on that road at that time. One of my intelligence contacts quickly checked the available information and reported back that 2 Soviet trucks should be parked for the night on that road, one of them in the exact location where my friend had seen the green and white van. Furthermore, the vans were still en route to their targets and still had nuclear weapons aboard. My friend then spent the next 4 hours trying in vain to bring about some decisive action concerning the van. He called a friend who was acquainted with my warnings about the bombs, getting him out of bed at 1:30 a.m., and together they tried in vain to get the appropriate law enforcement authorities in that area to go with them and investigate the van. Finally they drove back out to the van at around 3:30 a.m., stopped behind it with their car lights illuminating the van, and took 2 photographs, one a close-up of the Florida license plate. The next day they went to the local police headquarters and asked them for identification information about the van, giving them the Florida license number. The police used their teletype to check with Florida, and the State of Florida wired back that the license number given them was non-existent and the van unidentifiable. And so it has gone, my friends. Those who are ready and willing to take action on behalf of our beloved country are hampered by limited resources, and those who do have the necessary resources and authority to take decisive action refuse to do so for an endless variety of reasons. Many simply do not believe. Others cannot bring themselves to part with a portion of their own personal wealth, time, and effort, but cast about forever looking for someone else to do it. And virtually everyone in a position of authority to act, whether great or small, is not strengthened by that authority, but imprisoned by it, afraid to run any risk of a wrong decision that might hurt their career. Meanwhile time has slipped by waiting for no man, and now the Soviet Union has completed their project of planting nuclear mines in the inland lakes and rivers of the United States. Furthermore, since they still have not been impeded in any way, they are now placing additional bombs at other kinds of targets, which were ranked lower in priority than our water resources. My basic task of warning you in advance about the plans of our hidden rulers for events to come was completed with AUDIO LETTER number 24 3 months ago. Now unfortunately a new phase is beginning for the AUDIO LETTER, because increasingly it will be my duty now to chronicle the step-by-step fulfillment of these terrible plans as they are carried out. Time and again these plans have been delayed, tripped up, and brought to nothing by our merciful God, who wanted us to use our heads, to see the truth around us for what it is, and turn to Him. But, my friends, you know as well as I do that America as a nation has not done this. So now, by our own choice, we are going to suffer, and the suffering will get worse and worse until and unless we as a people open our eyes. I realize, my friends, that these are hard words. Many will hear them and reject them outright. But this I know: events themselves are going to put man in his place in no uncertain terms. My 3 special topics for today are: Topic number 1, the Panama Canal trapped for war; Topic number 2, the Second Battle of Britain; and Topic number 3, man-made earthquakes to set the stage for Nuclear War I. Topic number 1. 4.5 years ago, in early 1973, I wrote my book, The Conspiracy Against the Dollar. I ended the book with the following words of warning about the Panama Canal, quote, "The United States presence in the Panama Canal Zone area is a geostrategic necessity to ensure shipping through the canal. It will also become a geostrategic necessity for the new Asian aristocracy, just as Europe became for the new imperialism. If the new Asian forces are not understood, but are met with ignorance and arrogance, then the world will indeed be headed not for a, quote, generation of peace, unquote, of which President Nixon has so proudly boasted, but for World War III. End of quotation from my book. By June 1974, I had received hard evidence to the effect that the Republic of Guyana, Venezuela's neighbor, had become the new Cuba, with nuclear medium-range missiles targeted on the Panama Canal as well as targets in the extreme southern United States. I reported this on radio talk shows all around the United States at that time, together with additional intelligence to the effect that the Panama Canal was being planned for use in triggering nuclear war on America 3 to 4 years later on, that is, mid-1977 to mid-1978. In October 1974, I recorded my first talking tape entitled How to Protect Yourself During the Coming Depression and Third World War, and in that tape, recorded nearly 3 years ago, I repeated my warnings about the plans of powerful men to deliberately involve America in nuclear war and the plans to use the Panama Canal to help trigger this war. 3 and 4 years ago my warnings about nuclear war to come fell on deaf ears. So-called détente with the Soviet Union was in full bloom after all, and besides, wasn't the United States the most powerful nation on earth? And as for the Panama Canal, most Americans then were not even thinking about the canal, much less excited about it. But now, it is 3 years later. In the short space of a year, what was called détente has been shredded and dumped in the trash basket. Frightening new estimates of fantastic military spending by the Soviet Union have been disclosed by the CIA after playing down such spending for 10 years. Well-known Rockefeller associates have formed a group called the Committee for the Present Danger to publicize the Soviet drive for military dominance, and the Panama Canal has become an issue that grows hotter by the day. The so-called surprise attack on Pearl Harbor nearly 36 years ago disarmed all political opposition to America's entry into the war in Europe. In one stroke, the Pearl Harbor attack created a wave of emotion to go to war. In the same way, the real rulers of America are now setting up the American people for another such wave of emotion, this time over the Panama Canal. The conspirators do not really want any new treaties with Panama, despite the lip service in favor of them by their hired hands, such as Carter and Kissinger. Their actual goal is the exact opposite. They want people like Senators Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms, not to mention Ronald Reagan, to fight the pair of new treaties and defeat them, thus giving Panama an excuse to go to Moscow for help. This is why conservative leaders and organizations are suddenly getting all the publicity they can handle on the Panama Canal issue, courtesy of none other than the Rockefeller-dominated major media. Since the defeat of the 2 new Panama Canal treaties will be blamed on the conservatives, they will also be blamed for the consequent events in the mindless march toward nuclear war. The self-styled conservative leaders in Congress, therefore, are falling into a dangerous trap and taking millions of good and patriotic people with them. They look the other way about such things as the Fort Knox gold scandal, and they run the other way rather than investigate the Soviet nuclear sabotage of our own country. But the emotional appeal and great publicity surrounding the Panama Canal issue have made it too juicy to resist, and they have swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Whether the canal is used as the final trigger for Nuclear War I itself, or whether it plays only a supporting role in bringing on the war, is still at the option of the conspirators. But either way, the conservatives lose. Even so, this is not to say that Jimmy Carter will win on this issue. 4 days after Carter's inauguration as President 7 months ago, in AUDIO LETTER No. 20, I alerted you that a Carter Watergate was already in the works, and now, my friends, it has already begun. In the 3 months since I recorded AUDIO LETTER No. 24, the controversy over the personal finances of Burt Lance, Carter's budget director and former banker, has turned into daily headline news. Because of the closeness of the ties between Carter and Lance, Carter's image has already begun to suffer, but this is only the beginning. Not only is Carter's moral leadership image being tarnished by his defense of questionable practices by Lance, but more and more questions are being raised in the major media about Carter's judgment. And once a leader's judgment ceases to be trusted, he is finished. Confusion in NATO over what to expect from the Carter administration is causing nervousness, and recently this boiled over into bitter German protests when a secret White House contingency plan came to light. The plan calls for 1/3 of West Germany to be conceded in the event of a Soviet invasion. Can you imagine? As of now, only one major factor is preventing a complete rift between the United States and the European members of NATO. That single factor is the hope that Carter will proceed with production of the neutron bomb, a tactical weapon. Without this bomb, the increasingly outnumbered and outgunned NATO forces will face hopeless odds in any Warsaw Pact attack. But the American neutron bomb has one weakness that may prevent it from doing NATO any good. It would not be deployed for operational use until at least a year and a half from now, in 1979. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union already has operational neutron bombs. A neutron bomb is a special version of a hydrogen bomb, so designed that a shower of deadly neutron radiation covers an area much larger than the area affected by the explosive blast. In nuclear weapons terminology, it is a clean bomb, because it produces very little fallout or residual radioactivity in comparison to conventional nuclear weapons. If exploded above a city, for example, it can destroy all life over a wide area and yet do relatively little blast damage to buildings and structures in the area. 14 months ago in AUDIO LETTER No. 13, I revealed that the Soviet Union already has such so-called clean hydrogen bombs. And 3 months ago, when I recorded AUDIO LETTER No. 24, I reported that 7 trucks bearing nuclear weapons and driven by Soviet agents had been stopped by Canadian authorities on May 18, just before they attempted to cross over the border from Canada into northern Idaho. As of the recording date, I had not yet received any further word about any action taken, but now I can tell you more. The 7 trucks were driven by a total of 14 Canadian and American Communists, 2 per truck. They were apprehended by a special joint unit of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Army Security and placed under arrest after the nature of their cargo was confirmed. They were all charged with acts of treason and incarcerated initially at Wainwright, Alberta, but they have since been transferred to one or more other unspecified locations. Each truck was loaded with 2 14-foot-long crates, 3 feet square. Each crate contained a small single-warhead missile, and it was learned by Canadian intelligence that the trucks were all bound for Lake Superior. All 14 of these missiles were the same type as the 53 previously planted in the Great Lakes, and the warheads were all neutron bombs. Thus the Soviet Union can still satisfy all of the considerations which originally led them to agree to the super-secret nuclear safe zone across the upper portion of the United States, which I revealed in AUDIO LETTER No. 12 for May 1976. Since neutron bombs kill people, but preserve most real estate, the great industrial and agricultural heartland of America will still be usable for Soviet benefit after Nuclear War I, and the explosion of clean neutron bombs over our northern cities will not produce significant fallout to drift around the globe and land on Russia. After the 14 neutron bomb missiles were disarmed, they were divided up. Several were sent to Great Britain and several to the United States, while several remained in Canada. Within 2 weeks the neutron bomb suddenly became big news in the United States, with Jimmy Carter in the spotlight as the man to decide whether such a thing would be produced or not. By early July, news reports said that the United States had already tested a neutron bomb at the underground test site in Nevada. But what was not mentioned is that this was a test of a Soviet warhead, like those now lurking in the Great Lakes, not an American device. Canadian officials are completely baffled at this point by the conduct of the United States government in keeping all these things under wraps. But the Canadians are abiding by their obligations under mutual defense treaties not to break the story publicly on a unilateral basis, because certain key officials apparently still do not believe that top American officials are deliberately betraying us all into nuclear disaster. And now, my friends, the nuclear mining of strategic points in Canada too has begun, beginning around Montreal, while continued secrecy allows the Soviet Union to build their war trap all around us. Topic number 2. On September 30, 1938, the famous agreement at Munich was reached, which was then hailed by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain as assuring peace in our time. For years the British and French had watched Hitler's Germany as it rearmed to the teeth, and the only response had been a policy of appeasement. As a result, at Munich they were negotiating from a position of weakness, and to further appease Hitler they agreed to the partition of a country that was not even party to the negotiations, Czechoslovakia. But as we all know, the Munich Agreement did not bring peace in our time. Less than 2 years after Munich, on July 10, 1940, the skies over Britain suddenly filled with Hitler's bombers, and the Battle of Britain had begun. The lightning warfare that had paralyzed and crushed other victims was now to smash Britain as well, or so it seemed. To the summer and autumn of 1940, the world watched for the invasion of Britain to be launched across the English Channel, but the invasion never came. The world watched with growing astonishment as the Spitfires of the Royal Air Force ruined attack after attack by Goering's Air Armada. For the British, in spite of public pronouncements about peace in our time, had learned the lesson of Munich well, and during the short breathing space that followed, the British government had secretly launched a crash program to prepare for the fight for survival that was looming ahead. We in America, who had not yet experienced the horrors of war on our own soil, have had our survival instinct lulled to sleep by propaganda and distractions of all kinds, but not so Great Britain. Some months ago I revealed that of all the nations of the free world, only Great Britain is engaging in a sustained, determined effort to stave off military attack by the Soviet Union to the best of her ability. And, my friends, this is still true, because the lessons of the past are not lost on the British. On June 18, 1940, Sir Winston Churchill spoke in the House of Commons to declare that the British were determined to fight rather than surrender, whatever the odds, and that same spirit is quietly being rekindled in Britain today. An internal struggle within the British government is going on between those with this view and others, some of them very powerful, who are Rockefeller agents, striving to induce Britain to lie down and die. But so far there are still enough patriots in the British government to carry the day. When I recorded audio letter number 15 1 year ago in August 1976, I revealed the navigational coordinates of 64 newly planted Soviet underwater-launched nuclear missiles in the territorial waters of the countries around the world. At that time, Soviet missiles were planted more densely around the British Isles than anywhere else on earth, because the Soviet Union views England like a giant aircraft carrier that must be sunk to help free the Soviet Navy to explode into the Atlantic unhampered when war comes. The importance of this to the Soviet Union was illustrated the following month in late September 1976. As I reported in audio letter number 16 for that month, the Soviet Union carried out a massive, extremely rapid deployment of submarines into attack positions along our east, west, and Gulf coasts late in September, involving at least 142 submarines. This took place only a matter of days after I had met for well over an hour at the Pentagon with General George S. Brown, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to discuss the growing Soviet underwater missile crisis with him. The purpose of the massive deployment of Soviet naval power along our shores was a power play to prevent the United States Navy from being allowed to capture a Soviet missile-laying mini-sub that was then trapped in Chesapeake Bay. And as I reported the following month in audio letter number 17, it worked. The very idea that the Soviet Union is capable of such rapid, massive, and well-coordinated deployments of its huge submarine fleet seems unbelievable to many, and many therefore ignored what I revealed last September about this incident. But just 4 weeks ago, on July 29, 1977, NATO intelligence sources in Brussels revealed a recent naval exercise by the Soviet Union that once again exhibited the same capability to fill the oceans with overwhelming numbers of submarines. According to the news dispatched by the British Reuters news service, quote, 89 Soviet submarines swarmed into the Atlantic Ocean recently in a massive show of naval strength that stretched NATO surveillance forces to their limits, NATO intelligence sources revealed yesterday. More Soviet submarines were deployed between North America and Europe than ever before, said one senior intelligence officer. And, my friends, this statement is true, since the 142 submarines that threatened the United States last September were not all in the Atlantic. Many were in the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific. Quoting the Reuters dispatch again, American and British submarines, which usually trail Soviet submarines, were unable to cope with the rush, and NATO had to resort to other, less effective means to keep track of many of the boats. Unquote. Another quote, the submarines were accompanied by a large force of surface warships, including the aircraft carrier Kiev, which bears vertical takeoff and landing jet fighters. Long-range warplanes, including some of the 400 supersonic backfire bombers that the Russians now operate, flew over the maneuvering fleet from their bases in the Murmansk area, the sources said. Unquote. Another quote, NATO views the deployment of the Soviet submarine fleet to sea as one of its most important warning signs that a conflict is about to begin. Unquote. That, my friends, is why the stationing of so many Soviet submarines in attack positions around the United States was so ominous last September. Notice who was responsible for letting the public know about this latest huge Soviet naval exercise. Not anyone in the United States government, but NATO authorities in Europe. To quote one more line from the Reuters dispatch, which was omitted in the New York Times,
Quote, "The United States Defense Department had no comment on the story." Unquote. America's real rulers do not want us to know even about Soviet practice exercises as huge as the one in April 1977, much less the occurrence of actual confrontations like the one I told you about last September. Great Britain is acutely aware of all these things. She is aware of the increasing handicaps that plague the European part of the NATO alliance, and she's finding out that the United States can no longer be depended upon for help in time of crisis. She is determined not to be sunk by the Soviet Union. First, the British have been taking an objective new look at the cold, hard facts of their circumstances. A month ago, on July 26, 1977, the Defense Committee of Parliament made public a report that spelled out in clear terms a number of important measures needing revision and upgrading in Britain's defense posture. And the report begins by discarding the comforting but unrealistic idea that heightened tensions would always provide an advance warning before any Soviet attack. Instead, they're coming to grips with the need to be prepared for a more likely event of a surprise attack. The Parliament Committee also warned of the threat of Soviet mine laying in the English Channel and the North Atlantic. Meanwhile, spurred on by the Soviet underwater missile crisis for a full year now, the British have developed a new mine-detecting sonar equipment to enable underwater missiles and mines to be detected. For several months now, the Royal Navy has been using this highly secret new equipment built by the Plessy Company of England to keep British waters cleared of Soviet missiles and bombs without depending any longer on the intelligence tips I was relaying to them earlier. I would not mention this now except that a recent incident occurred that has already compromised this vital new equipment to Soviet agents. Recently, the West German Navy, eager to begin using this same equipment to start clearing their own coastal waters of Soviet missiles, was to receive a shipment of the highly classified equipment from the Plessy Company. But a Soviet agent in Britain achieved a remarkable feat of espionage by bringing about a misrouting of this equipment on an East German ship. By the time this vital equipment finally arrived, overdue and damaged, it had been thoroughly studied and photographed by Soviet technical experts. As a result, the Soviet Union may now be able to find ways to defeat even the sophisticated new British sonar, just as they are already able to defeat American seabed sonar defenses in order to plant missiles in our waters. Despite this setback, the British are working quietly but quickly to prepare to go it alone if need be when war comes, even though they realize that they would not be able to hold out indefinitely under those conditions. Unlike the United States, Britain is beefing up its surveillance of spies. Defense installations are being hardened and camouflaged, and the RAF is in the process of going underground, just as the Soviet Union has already done. The British government now knows privately that Great Britain has already been deserted by the outlaw government of the United States, and in late last month, on July 27, 1977, the British deserted the floundering United States dollar. For a generation and more, the pound sterling and the dollar have been linked together in an unofficial way, but no more. The Bank of England announced it would no longer be required to support the dollar in the international monetary float, and since that time British reserves of gold and currency have risen substantially, strengthening the pound, while the American dollar has been sinking in international currency markets. It may be that the British ship of state will, in the end, be unable to stay afloat through the storm of all-out nuclear war, but so far the British still prefer to take that risk rather than scuttling their own ship, as the United States government under Rockefeller control is now doing. Topic number 3. My friends, The nuclear mining of America's inland lakes and rivers has now been completed without incident by Soviet agents, thanks to their protection from harassment by Rockefeller agents in the Federal Government. At least 3 different models of small hydrogen bombs have been utilized so far by Soviet agents in this project. One is a design which has been in use for the greater part of a decade, as bombs were planted during construction of certain major dams and water projects. A second type, oval in shape, 17 inches in diameter and 34 inches in length, has been deployed very widely throughout the United States in recent months. It weighs several hundred pounds, and handling is therefore a problem, with the result that great care is always taken to plant these when the area nearby is deserted. Usually, but not always, this is done at night. These bombs are the pride and joy of Soviet boss Brezhnev because they incorporate technology that originated many years ago in his own rocket programs. In areas where the bottom is soft and silt-covered, these bombs are able to embed themselves in the silt. Under ideal test conditions in the Soviet Union, it was found that they were able to penetrate to depths as great as 80 feet. And there are a few locations in America, primarily in the lower Mississippi River, where depths that rival this may actually have been achieved operationally. Best of all, from the Soviet point of view, is their reliability. This system, by which the bomb practically blasts its way into the silt by using a powerful jet of steam at temperatures above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, uses no moving parts. The jet is started before the bomb is dropped in the water, and after that it runs until the fuel is exhausted. The fuel itself, according to my own intelligence sources, is the oldest, most reliable, and cheapest of all rocket fuels, highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide, which leaves no residue to be detected afterward. A third type of bomb that is now being used is a small general-purpose H-bomb, whose primary feature is compactness. A few of these have been planted in water, but these are mostly being used now in the newest phase of the Soviet nuclear mining program. First, Washington, D.C. was mined. All the bridges into Washington are now mined, as are important buildings throughout the city. These include the Capitol Building, Senate and House office buildings, the Executive Office Building, the Treasury Building, 7 bombs at Fort Myer, Virginia, the Pentagon, and even the White House itself, plus many other points, a total of 57 in the nation's capital. In addition, bombs have now been planted in at least 33 of the 50 state capitals. Congress, the President, and state governments have so far refused to act to protect the people, but now they themselves are being targeted, and symbols of our national pride and heritage in Washington are to be destroyed without a trace. Time does not permit a complete listing of even the nuclear devices in the Mississippi River, which now contains 158 bombs. As of my latest report on July 7, 1977, every lock in the Mississippi River, except number 2 at Hastings, Minnesota, now has a Soviet H-bomb in or near it. In addition, almost every bridge crossing the Mississippi along its entire length has a bomb planted at one end or the other as of that date, and it was anticipated that by now there would no longer be any exceptions. Thus the Soviet Union plans to be able to cut the country in half, east to west, to anything but air transportation, which under war conditions will be totally controlled by the Federal Government under the provisions of Executive Orders 11490 and 11921. In addition, the Mississippi is to be ruined as a navigable waterway connecting north and south along the Mississippi Valley. And the master strategy that has been applied to the Mississippi has also been applied to the other great waterways of America, such as the Illinois Waterway and the Ohio River. Now it remains only to trigger a declaration of national emergency, and after that, Nuclear War I. When I recorded audio letter number 24 in May 1977, just 3 months ago, I warned that, quote, "A horrendous new capability is now in place as an alternate means for creating our national emergency, and, my friends, there are ominous signs that this capability is going to be used very soon," unquote. I then gave the locations of 7 fission bombs planted strategically around the undersea trenches east and west of the Philippines, where they can trigger massive earthquakes and tidal waves. These 7 gigaton bombs are the most powerful weapons ever devised by man, and the disaster that erupts there is planned to work its way around the Ring of Fire to produce an artificial West Coast disaster centering on California that will be used to justify a declaration of national emergency. In the 3 months since I last spoke to you, the Soviet Union has also deployed 10 additional super bombs to assist in this diabolical attack on the Earth's crust itself. These are less powerful than the 7 doomsday bombs planted around the Philippines, but are extremely powerful nonetheless. These 10 new bombs are known as cobalt bombs, so called because they are surrounded by a jacket of cobalt. When the cobalt bomb was first proposed many years ago, it was universally feared and condemned because while it is less powerful than the gigaton bombs in the Philippines, it would be even dirtier in radioactive fallout if exploded in the air. Pound for pound, the radioactive cobalt-60 produced by the explosion emits 25 times as much deadly gamma radiation as radium. It decays relatively fast, with a half-life of just over 5 years. But if detonated in the air, some scientists believe the fallout could destroy all human life before the radiation decayed to harmless levels. But as with the uranium jacket gigaton bomb, the Soviet Union has found a way to use the cobalt bomb deep under the ocean for geophysical warfare, and having solved the dangerous problems involved in manufacturing and handling such weapons, the Soviet Union now has available an intermediate-yield super bomb that is far cheaper than bombs made from uranium. Of the 10 Soviet cobalt bombs deployed so far, 9 are positioned along boundaries between the slowly shifting crustal plates that cover the surface of the Earth, while the 10th is targeted on a prime American naval target, Pearl Harbor. Their purpose is to produce a pattern of increasing earthquake and tidal wave activity as a build-up to the big disaster that awaits the Philippines. The 10 Soviet cobalt bombs were planted in the following locations. Number 1, 11 degrees 8 minutes 28 seconds south, 118:32:23 east. This is roughly 900 miles southeast of Jakarta, Indonesia, near the east end of the Java Trench, south of the islands of Sumba and Sumbawa. Number 2, 11:00 south, 115:8:34 east. This is around 370 miles west of location number 1, deep in the Java Trench, south of the islands of Bali and Sumbawa, Indonesia. Number 3, 1333 south, 149:00 east. This is in the area of the Bismarck Archipelago, northeast of New Guinea. Number 4, 10:57:9 south, 159:30:30 east. This is in the confluence of trenches southwest of Guadalcanal, 1,500 miles northeast of Australia. Number 5, 15:52:23 south, 172:34:50 west. This is in the north end of the Tonga Trench, little more than 100 miles southwest of Pago Pago, Samoa. Number 6, 12:22:51 north, 145:40:0 east. This is in the Marianas Trench, roughly 75 miles southeast of Guam. Number 7, 37:35:10 north, 144:5:20 east in the Japan Trench, around 350 miles northeast of Tokyo. Number 8, 23:25:46 north, 108:23:14 west. This is in the deep central portion of the Gulf of California, between the southern tip of Baja California and the mainland of Mexico, and lies along the same crustal fault line that is known as the San Andreas Fault, where it passes through California. Number 9, 20, 00 north, 73, 52, 16 west. This is in a short but deep trench off the east end of Cuba, and about 80 miles due east of the United States Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And finally, number 10, 20, 54, 28 north, 158, 48, 17 west. This is about 70 miles west-southwest of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, the headquarters of the United States Pacific Fleet. The Soviet plan is to artificially create a seemingly natural but disturbing pattern of increasingly widespread earthquakes, primarily around the Pacific Rim. The stars of this preliminary show are to be these cobalt bombs in the oceans, but several artificial earthquakes on land are also to be triggered. One or more of these preliminary earthquakes on land may involve the collapse of a dam in the United States, adding fuel to the fire publicity over supposedly unsafe federal dams. Finally, this build-up is to culminate in a supposed natural disaster in the Philippines, produced in reality by the triggering in proper sequence of the 7 Soviet gigaton bombs. If all goes according to plan, unprecedented earthquakes in awesome tidal waves will cause death and destruction in the Philippines on a scale unparalleled in a modern history. And not incidentally, our major naval installations and the huge Clark Air Base in the Philippines will be destroyed. When it's all over, our naval and other military installations in Hawaii will also be gone, as will our Guantanamo Naval Base and important naval installations on America's west coast and in Japan. America will have been dealt a staggering military blow, but the only declaration by the United States government will not be one of war and retaliation, but only of national emergency, in effect suspending the remaining tatters of the United States Constitution. It all sounds too horrible to be true, my friends, but in actual fact it has already begun. When I recorded audio letter number 24 3 months ago, there was no unusual earthquake activity going on, but based on intelligence made available only to me, I warned that this was about to change, and soon. And just 1 week ago, on August 19, 1977, an undersea earthquake suddenly erupted just south of the Indonesian islands of Sumba and Sumbawa. The reports of damage and casualties are still filtering in today, 1 week later. But this quake was rated by some seismic readings as possibly the strongest quake ever recorded, registering 8.9 on the Richter scale. A tidal wave 100 feet high swept in from the south and washed away everyone and everything in its path. This quake, my friends, was produced by the detonation of the Soviet cobalt bomb number 1 in the list I just gave you. And, my friends, the Soviet Union is wasting no time now. Only this morning, just before I began the recording of this tape, Soviet cobalt bomb number 2 was detonated. The result this time was a less spectacular quake, according to first reports, centered south of Sumbawa and Bali, but with a reading of only 6.3 on the Richter scale. My friends, during the past 4.5 years, I've tried in every way I know to warn America in time for these and other man-made disasters to be prevented. But I am only a messenger, relaying vital information to you for which I myself cannot take the credit. What happens from here on is up to you, your neighbor, our country as a whole. Not until and unless my voice is silenced by federal emergency regulations, war or other factors beyond my control, I pledge to you to do all in my power to keep you fully informed about what is happening and where it is leading. Meanwhile, I can only urge you to continue to place yourself in the hands of God. Until next month, God willing, this is Dr. Beter. Thank you, and may God protect each and every one of you.